Hi there. So in the last video we had a look at how we could edit some accounting reports. In this one we are going to see how we can create some reports. I told you in the last video that the report edition was quite complex because based on the way the module interacts with the existing records, you could lose some of your changes. You couldn't know exactly, without being a bit technical expert, what the module would do when upgrading the module. Would it rewrite the record or not? So that's why I told you at the end of the video, well, the edition is maybe not the best way to act when you want to improve your reports on Odoo. It's better to create new reports, and that's what you are going to see today. And as I didn't want to have a video that would last hours, I tried to keep it simple. And so today we are going to create a working capital report. I decided it would be a report quite easy to understand, both functionally and to execute technically. So it was quite nice to work with this one. You can have a look at the definition on Wikipedia, but I give it here too. So the working capital is a financial metric which represents operating liquidity available to a business, and the formula is quite simple. So it's the current assets minus the current liabilities. And usually we say that a positive working capital generally indicates that a company is able to pay off all of its short-term liabilities almost immediately. So it may sound counterintuitive, but the first thing we are going to create is the menu item on which we will click, and that would display then the report. In order to do so, go into the accounting, and let's have a look at how this is working right now for the profit and loss report. If I click on the profit and loss, you will see that at the moment I have a report that is displayed when I click on one of the menu items. If I change the menu item, it displays another report. Well, of course, all of this is also configurable in Odoo, and what we are going to do is first, on our side, create the menu item here and also the report that we will find here in financial report. So let's create the menu item. And in order to create the menu item, I will rather duplicate an existing one. I can find the menu item under user interface menu items here, and I will have a look at the profit and loss. You see that there is a menu item. This element that we can see here is the equivalent of what we can see right here, this menu item. I will duplicate it. Oops. I will change the name. I told you we are going to work on the working capital report. I save it, but don't forget, you need also to change the action that will lead to the report. Here at the moment we have created the menu, and we know that the parent menu will be the same. We can keep it under legal statements. We can maybe change the sequence so that it will be the first one. And we need also to change, because here otherwise it will link to the profit and loss. And let's have a look at the action that is behind. We can see that here we have a context that is given with this action. And in fact, the context will redirect to the correct financial report. You can see that here in the context we see financial underscore report, and then we see 1. That's because initially the profit and loss is the first report. It has an ID here, you can see it, of 1. So if we want to change the context, and so the financial report that will be loaded, we need first to duplicate this item. And I will change here, and I will tell you, okay, we need to put another ID here. What would be the ID? Well, I don't know yet, in fact, because I didn't create the accounting report yet. So let's keep this window open for now, and I will create the accounting report. Let's go into financial report here. Let's create a new report. And let's say, okay, I'm going to create the working capital. I'm just going to say I will base this on a single date, and let's create it. Here I have my report that is created. It doesn't contain anything, but at least I have the name of it, and I created a record, and that record, you can see it here, it has an ID. So the ID for this record is 6. I can now use this here and say, okay, it will be ID number 6. I can change here and say, okay, it's working capital. I'm saving this. Going back to the menu item, I see that here I should be changing as well. And that's very, very important, of course, the action. I created working capital, I already created first before. Okay, that's the one with 6. I already created first. Let's save this. Now it is saved. I can go back here in my accounting, refresh the page, and at least I will see once it is refreshed that I have under report here, I have working capital. It's the first one because of the sequence, and I can click there and it will show my report. Of course, there is nothing inside. We are going to learn now how we can put things inside this report. And in order to create this new report under the definition, I will base my work on the profit and loss reports. I will every time switch between the profit and loss and another report, which is my report here under financial reports. Don't forget to be in debug mode. And I will switch here between my profit and loss definition and the working capital, because you'll see that it will make it easier to, let's say, copy and base our work on something that is already existing in Odoo. And if I want to compare here, I can have a look at the profit and loss, and you can see that the first item, well, the only item inside the report profit and loss is the net profit. In fact, this will be the bottom line of my report, and I will do the same here with the working capital, and I will create a first line, and I will call it simply working capital. I can give it a code. Sequence, I will keep it as 0. And a notion of parent here, there is no parent left. I can choose because this will be the parent item for all the next ones. The level, that's the first level, so I keep it that way. And at the moment, I can keep the same information right here. I won't put any computation. I don't want to make it too complex. I will just create the children lines and say that here, if I save this one, I can go back to this and say this time, as I base my job of the definition on the definition I explained during the concept, I'm going to say here, well, we want to have the total assets. Let's call this way. I put a sequence, and this time I give a parent here. It will be working capital, but it's not existing yet because I didn't save till the end, so I will revert back, save and close this. I go back here, I enter my children line, yeah, that's it, total assets, code. And now I should find, yeah, my working capital. Then this time I will have a higher level because I want to indent. I will keep the same information here. I won't have any children line, but I will have another one here. I will have total assets, and then I will have total liabilities. Well, current liabilities. I will use a second sequence, and I put it at the same level. Let's save and close, and let's have a look at the structure of our report. I keep the definition here, and I will open the report right here. Now you can see that at least I have some elements in my report, although I don't have any numbers next to it. I have the total assets, I have the current liabilities, and I have the working capital that will be the sum of both items. So we have here the report definition, and if we want to now compute the total assets and the current liabilities, that's maybe the trickiest part, of course. Let's have a small reminder about what was in the profit and loss when we wanted to show some numbers. You remember that under the net profit we had the income, and that every time we had formulas here. You could have formulas that say, okay, we have a balance and we'd like it to be computed according to what's on the right side of the equal sign. And you had here, if you remember past videos, we saw that this was the code used here. You see that here we have the code that is using right here. And so it was a way for us to aggregate some data and then call the balance, the credit or the debit, with a prefix that would be the code that we have here or here for the sub-items. And so we had formulas saying, okay, the balance for this item, the income, is computed by summing all these elements. Well, let's dive a bit further, and we see that here at the end we see how the balance is computed for each element. And if you remember well, we said that, okay, this domain was a way for us to select all the accounting items that were matching this domain. I won't get too technical about the domain, but we are going to reuse that notion. I think that if it's too complex, I will have to create another video, but I will again base my work on the domain here. But let's go a bit further in the definition of our report. I will close all of this and I will get back to the main item, so the net profit, and it's telling me, okay, the balance for the net profit will be the result that is stored into the Inc code, so this, the income, minus the balance that is stored into the expenses. Let's do the same with our working capital. I told you it would be here the total assets minus the current liabilities, so let's have the same kind of formula. We can enter here, the balance will be the balance for the total asset minus the balance for the current liabilities. Of course, here, if I save this and I have a look at my report, I have 0 because I don't have anything in my total assets and current liabilities. So let's go a bit further now. Let's try to compute at least the total assets. And let's have a look at our profit and loss. I told you that we are going to base our research on some kind of domain that would be like the one we have here on the operating income, except that this one, the user type we will accept, will not only encompass the ID 14, but some other IDs, because the assets are quite a broad definition in the accounting. So let's try to have here the same domain first on the working capital. Let's go here. Oops, I need to edit. Let's go here, my total assets, and I will use a formula in a domain. And here I'm going to say also the balance should be the sum of the balance of the item I have in my domain. But the domain this time, let's try first with this simple domain, but we will see that it's not enough. Let's keep that, and you know that here I will have the same amount as the income. Let's save this. Let's save my working capital report. Now if I go back and I print again my working capital, you see that the assets here, it should have the same amount as the income on my profit and loss, because it's the same definition. And in my profit and loss, I see that here, yeah, of course, here just for match, but if I select this financial year, yeah, I have the same amount. And that's because here, for these reports, I base this on a period, while on the other side, my working capital is not based on a period, but based on a date. So obviously here, the total asset is not showing exactly the assets, but it was just to test the formula. So let's go back here, and we are going to find together what could be the information that should be in the domain here. Basically, I will still base my search on the user types of the accounts, but it shouldn't only be the ID 14. It should be a lot more than just this ID. If you want to check that and know what should be contained here, what you can do is have a look at your chart of accounts. And you can see that here, if I go into the accounting, I can have a look at my chart of accounts and group all those accounts per account type. And the account type that's here, and the grouping I have here, is exactly the same notion as the user type I have here. So when I say I would like to see all the journal items that have an account that is of user type 14, I'm saying, okay, I would like to see all the accounts that are of user type 14. We don't see here the match between the name and the user type, but I know that here 14 stands for income. So if I want to do something and compute all the entries that are linked to an asset account or an asset account type, I should do kind of the same job here, but except of selecting only the 14, I will select more than just the 14. So a quick way to know all the IDs you need to select would be to export this kind of information and then fetch the ID, or maybe to show a menu item here that would allow you to show the account types. On my side, I won't export right here, but I'm pretty sure you know how to do that. I will use the ID because I know them, I have exported that. But I can already tell you that if I want to compute all the assets, I should select the receivables, the bank and cash, everything that is related to the credit cards, the current assets, the non-current assets, of course, the prepayment, the fixed assets as well, and the rest shouldn't be taken into account in the assets. So here, I will select some of the accounts that we have, account types, I should say. And as I have the ID, I won't be playing with the names here, but I will directly go here and say, okay, I'm going to select the ID is number 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Of course here that's because I exported the account types and I know the IDs. And I'm here adding square brackets because I'm now not playing just with one ID but with a set of IDs, and I need to say here not equal but in, so it means that it should be inside one of these numbers. And I will keep it that way for now, and I will just save this and again refresh my report. It should be slightly different. You see here now the amount completely changed, and this time we can consider that's really the total assets I have. And if I want to check that, I can have a look at the balance here. In the balance sheet, we can see that the total assets is the same amount. Now if you are smart, and I'm pretty sure you are, and you would tell me, well, why did we compute it again? And the assets, well, here we have here the bottom line. We should have found this earlier without spending time finding the different IDs we have here. Because here I didn't want to spend too much time explaining you how I found those, but you could be telling me, well, we have here the assets, shouldn't it be more simple to fetch that number and reuse it in our report? Yeah, of course that's possible. I just wanted to show you how we could do it ourselves, but here for the second part, let's focus on how we could reuse the current liabilities here, because we see that this is already computed. So for the first part, I wanted to recompute myself all of the assets by summing everything that is in the bank and cash, in the receivables, in the current assets, the prepayments, in the fixed and the non-current assets. So in fact, all the different types I computed are here, but I could have selected directly the bottom line of the assets here. So if I want to do better with the current liabilities, I can have a look at how I could reuse the current liabilities item here and select it so that I don't have to create a complex domain here in my next report definition. So let's dive into current liabilities definition. We see that here it's possible to unfold it, but if I want to check what's behind that, I need to go not in the profit and loss financial reports, but I need to go into the one about the balance sheet. Let's check under liabilities, and I see that here I have current liabilities, and here I have current liabilities and payables. We can see that here the total current liabilities is not just the section current liabilities, but also the payables. You can see that here in the balance sheet. So it's not only this one I need to take, but it's this one. So let's select the same formula here and just copy paste it and see what happens here in my working capital. Just select the current liabilities and say, okay, I want the same formula. Let's remove the tab and let's just save it like that. And if I go now in my report, working capital, now I can see that I have the same numbers and my report is complete. So what's really interesting in here is that I didn't have to spend too much time explaining how to compute the current liabilities because I reused something that was already existing. So I went here, I just specified under my working capital that my current liabilities was computed in a specific way, and I reused some of the codes. You remember some of the codes for other items that were already existing, so that I don't have to specify a new domain, which is maybe the most tedious part of the report creation. Now that the report is created, maybe we can spend some time into fine-tuning the report as well. We didn't spend enough time, I think, explaining the group by here, but if I go back on the total assets, for example, you could have said, well, I would like to group by the information by account ID. And if I group by account ID, you will have the ability, when refreshing the working capital report, you would see that here it's possible to ungroup the total assets based on the different accounts. So that's because I simply selected here in my working capital that I wanted to ungroup by account. It could have been by journal as well, if I change and say journal ID, but of course you need to know a bit of the different fields name if you want to achieve what I'm doing right now. If I do it with the journals, then you see, well, now it's grouped or let's say ungrouped per journal. The last thing I wanted to talk about today was the fact that here at the moment in the working capital we only spend or energy focusing on the balance. But it's not the only variable that you can use. You can use the balance, the credit, and the debit. And for regrouping, you can group some sums. You could have said here, instead of WCTA, you could have summed up information based on a domain. So you would have then use sum and then balance, but then you need to give a domain here. Or you could have used something different, which is also sum if pos, and it would have given the sum if positive, otherwise it would have given 0. So those are the kind of variables that you can use here. But usually I think that working with the credit and the debit and the codes here, you already have a lot when you want to accomplish create new reports. So I think that's it for today. We saw lots of stuff. We saw how we could create a new report, that it was also the good way to do when you wanted to change or to have a new report. We saw how you could create a menu item and link the report to it, and then we adapted our report by creating sub-items, what we call children lines, and we did it in two different ways. The first one was to create it from scratch, and the second one was to reuse some children line information in order to, not spend too much time defining a report, or at least reuse what was already existing. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it.